before the sun rises tomorrow, before your feet touch the floor, before a single breath escapes your mouth, God has already been there. Hear me, tomorrow is not waiting to be discovered. It has been mapped. It is not wandering in uncertainty. It is standing on divine ground. What you call the unknown, God calls already written. What you fear as unpredictable, God declares prepared. And if your heart is trembling today, if your mind is restless, if your spirit feels caught between promise and pressure, then you must understand this truth with unshakable conviction. Your tomorrow is not an accident, not a gamble, not a dark tunnel without direction. God has gone ahead of you and drawn the lines, measured the steps, weighed the moments, and placed purpose where you thought there was only delay. Too many people wake up every day believing they are chasing tomorrow, when in reality, tomorrow is waiting for them under divine authority. They imagine life as a maze of random turns, unexpected blows, and fragile hopes. But God does not govern chaos. God governs order. God does not improvise. God establishes. God does not react. God commands. When God speaks, time obeys. When God decides, circumstances fall into alignment. When God maps tomorrow, no power can erase what has been decreed. You may feel late, you may feel behind, you may feel uncertain, but God has never been late, never been behind, never been unsure. And if God has mapped tomorrow, then your present struggle is not evidence of failure. It is proof that something greater is forming beyond your current vision. Listen closely, because this truth will shake the foundations of fear in your life. The enemy of your soul thrives on one thing, convincing you that tomorrow is out of God's control. That fear becomes louder when finances are tight, when relationships fracture, when health weakens, when prayers seem unanswered. But fear collapses the moment you realize that God already stood in your future and returned to tell you, do not be afraid. God does not offer comfort based on wishful thinking. God offers assurance based on foreknowledge. When God says tomorrow is mapped, it means every challenge has been measured, every door has been weighed, every delay has been accounted for, and every victory has been scheduled. There are moments when God intentionally allows silence, not because God has forgotten you, but because God is positioning you. Silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. Waiting is not punishment. Waiting is preparation. When a map is drawn, the traveler does not see every landmark at once, but the destination is already marked. God does not reveal everything at the beginning because faith would have no room to grow. God reveals what you need for today while holding tomorrow in divine custody. That is why anxiety is unnecessary. Worry is misplaced worship. Fear is an insult to the authority of God. When you worry, you assume responsibility for what God has already claimed. When you fear, you attempt to manage what God has already mastered. I speak to those whose nights are restless, whose thoughts race ahead into imagined disasters. You lie awake asking, what if this fails? What if I lose everything? What if nothing changes? But God asks you one question in return. Do you believe I know the end from the beginning? Because if you believe that God knows the end, then your present confusion cannot overthrow divine wisdom. If you believe God is sovereign, then uncertainty becomes a training ground, not a prison. God never maps tomorrow to torment you. God maps tomorrow to secure you. The map is not drawn to scare the traveler. It is drawn to guarantee arrival. Some of you have been interpreting resistance as rejection. You knock on doors that do not open and assume you are unwanted. But hear this word with authority. Closed doors are not evidence of divine disfavor. They are proof of divine direction. God closes what would destroy you. God blocks what would delay you. God redirects what would limit you. If tomorrow were left to chance, then every closed door would be tragedy. But because tomorrow is mapped, every closed door is mercy. You are not being pushed backward. You are being guided forward along a path that only God can see in its entirety. When God maps tomorrow, God does not erase struggle. God assigns meaning to it. The valley is not there to break you. It is there to deepen you. The fire is not there to consume you. It is there to refine you. The pressure is not there to crush you. It is there to shape you. God is not surprised by your weakness. God accounted for it in the design. God is not alarmed by your questions. God already included them in the journey. What you call fragile faith, God calls growing trust. What you call confusion, God calls transition. What you call the end, God calls the threshold. You must understand that faith is not pretending tomorrow will be easy. Faith is knowing tomorrow is governed. Faith does not deny reality. Faith submits reality to God. Faith does not shout optimism into emptiness. Faith stands on divine certainty. When God says tomorrow is mapped, God is declaring that no tear is wasted, no prayer is unheard, no sacrifice is unseen. Every seed you have sown in obedience is already recorded in eternity. Every act of integrity that went unnoticed by people was celebrated in the presence of God. And the harvest does not depend on your strength, it depends on God's faithfulness. There is a reason God does not show you the entire map at once. If you saw the magnitude of what lies ahead, your fear would overwhelm you before your faith matures. God reveals tomorrow in portions, step by step, day by day, because trust is built incrementally. God does not ask you to carry the weight of the future. God asks you to walk in obedience today. Tomorrow is not your responsibility. Tomorrow is God's territory. Your assignment is faithfulness in the present moment. When you obey today, you activate what God has already prepared for tomorrow. Some of you feel trapped between what was and what will be. You look back and see mistakes, missed opportunities, broken seasons. You look forward and see uncertainty, responsibility, risk. But God stands outside of time and speaks into your tension. I am already there. God is not confined. Add to your timeline. God is not restricted by your past. God does not negotiate with your failures. When God maps tomorrow, God does not consult your history. God establishes your destiny. The past may explain your wounds, but it does not define your future. God defines your future. There is a divine boldness that rises when you truly believe tomorrow is mapped. You stop begging for approval. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing rejection. You stop shrinking in rooms where you were meant to stand. When you know God has gone ahead of you, you walk with quiet authority. You speak with conviction. You endure with patience. You wait without panic because you are no longer guessing. You are trusting. And trust transforms the way you carry yourself through uncertainty. Let me speak directly to your heart now. You have been asking God for clarity, but God has been asking you for surrender. You want to see the map, but God wants you to trust the map maker. You want guarantees, but God wants obedience. Faith does not demand explanations. Faith responds to direction. The moment you stop insisting on understanding everything, peace will rise like a river within you. Peace does not come from knowing what will happen. Peace comes from knowing who holds what will happen. God has never failed to complete what God has begun. History itself stands as evidence of divine consistency. Generations rise and fall, systems collapse, empires fade, but the word of God remains. If God said tomorrow is mapped, then tomorrow cannot contradict divine intention. It may challenge you, stretch you, humble you, but it cannot destroy you. What is mapped by God is protected by God. What is designed by God is sustained by God. What is promised by God is fulfilled by God. There are moments when obedience feels costly. You give when it strains you. You forgive when it wounds you. You wait when impatience screams. But obedience is never wasted when tomorrow is mapped. Every act of faith is a step closer to what God has already ordained. You are not walking blindly. You are walking forward into preparation. Even when the path feels lonely, you are not alone. God does not send you where God has not already gone. Lift your eyes from the ground of your anxiety and look toward the horizon of God's sovereignty. Tomorrow is not a threat. Tomorrow is testimony in formation. Tomorrow is not danger. Tomorrow is destiny unfolding. The same God who sustained you yesterday governs you today and has already secured you tomorrow. You are not surviving by luck. You are sustained by design. You are not hoping for the best. You are anchored in the will of God. I declare this with spiritual authority. What you are walking through will make sense when you arrive where God has already planned. The confusion will become clarity. The pain will become purpose. The waiting will become witness. Do not rush the process. Do not despise the season. Do not abandon faith in the middle of formation. God does not waste seasons. God does not miscalculate steps. God does not forget promises. Stand firm when others panic. Rest when others run. Trust when others fear, because you know something they do not know. You know that tomorrow is not random. Tomorrow is not hostile. Tomorrow is not uncertain. Tomorrow is mapped by God, guarded by God, timed by God, and filled with intention. And as long as God is the one who holds the map, you can walk forward without trembling, breathe without panic, and live without surrendering to fear, because the hands that shape time itself are the same hands guiding your next step. And even now, God is speaking into your spirit that what you thought was falling apart is actually falling into place. What you believed was delayed is being aligned. What you feared was ending is only beginning. And the moment you release control and surrender trust, you will feel the weight lift, because tomorrow does not belong to chance. It belongs to God, and God has already marked the path, measured the distance, prepared the provision, assigned the strength, secured the outcome, and called you to walk forward, not because you are strong enough, but because God is faithful enough. And as you move even now, the unseen is shifting, the unseen is responding, the unseen is aligning, and the map that was written before you were born is unfolding before your eyes, step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment, according to the will of God, who never fails, who never forgets, who never abandons. And who even now is declaring over your life that tomorrow is mapped, and nothing you face will be outside the authority of God, who goes before you and stands behind you and surrounds you on every side as you walk forward into what has already been prepared. And even as your heart is receiving this truth, something deep within you is awakening, a confidence that cannot be shaken, a peace that cannot be stolen, a faith that cannot be silenced, because you are no longer waiting for tomorrow to happen. You are walking into what God has already written. And the journey ahead is not ruled by fear, but by divine purpose unfolding now and continuing even as you take the next step into what God has declared. And the map continues to unfold before you without fear, without doubt, without retreat, as you trust the voice of God calling you forward into what has already been established before time began. And even now, the weight lifts and the clarity comes and the assurance settles, and you move forward knowing that tomorrow is mapped by God. And therefore, nothing ahead can overthrow what has already been ordained by God, who holds your future securely and calls you to walk in confidence into what has already been prepared, without hesitation, without fear, without looking back, because the path ahead is already marked, and the hand of God is guiding every step as you move forward into the unfolding purpose that continues now and beyond, as the journey carries on without end, without fear, without doubt, trusting. Fully in God, who remains faithful and whose map remains unchanging and whose word stands firm, as you continue walking forward into tomorrow that is already mapped by God. There is a sacred strength that comes when you stop asking whether tomorrow will work out and start believing that tomorrow has already been worked on. God does not design the future with uncertainty. God designs it with intention. When you awaken to this truth, your posture changes. You no longer approach life as a victim of events, but as a steward of trust. You stop shrinking under pressure, because you understand pressure is not punishment, it is preparation. God allows weight only where God has already placed strength. You have survived what should have broken you, not because you were lucky, but because God measured the load before allowing it to touch you. Understand this deeply. God never sends you into a season without first equipping you for it. You may not feel ready, but readiness is not the requirement. Obedience is. God does not wait for confidence to move. Confidence is built by moving with God. The map of tomorrow includes moments that will stretch you beyond your comfort, but never beyond your capacity to grow. Growth is uncomfortable by nature, but stagnation is far more dangerous. God would rather stretch you than leave you small. God would rather refine you than let you rust. And every stretch has been calculated, every refinement purposeful. There are people listening who believe their imitations disqualify them. You see your lack of resources, your incomplete education, your broken past, your inconsistent faith, and you assume God must choose someone else. But God has never depended on human perfection to accomplish divine purpose. God works through surrendered hearts, not flawless resumes. Your weakness does not intimidate God. It invites God's power to be displayed. When tomorrow is mapped by God, your insufficiency becomes a stage for divine sufficiency. What you cannot do becomes the very place where God shows who is truly in control. You must also understand that God's map is not rushed. Timing is not an inconvenience to God. Timing is a weapon. God delays not to frustrate you, but to protect you from arriving too early or too late. Arriving too early can expose you before you are ready. Arriving too late can cause you to miss what was prepared. God's timing is precise, intentional, and merciful. The waiting you resent today will one day be the reason you were not destroyed by what you asked for prematurely. God does not withhold blessings. God withholds damage. Some of you have mistaken struggle for abandonment. You assume that if God were truly with you, the road would be smoother. But God never promised ease. God promised presence. Presence is more powerful than comfort. Presence sustains you in storms. Presence strengthens you in darkness. Presence whispers assurance when circumstances scream doubt. The fact that you are still standing, still believing, still hoping, still seeking is evidence that God has never left your side. If God had abandoned you, you would have collapsed long ago. You are here because God is faithful. There is also this truth you must carry with you. God's map includes people. Some will walk with you for a season. Some will challenge you. Some will leave without explanation. Do not cling to what God has released. Do not mourn what God has removed. Every relationship has an assignment, and when the assignment is complete, God allows separation so growth can continue. Holding on to what God has let go will slow your journey. Trust that God knows who belongs in your tomorrow and who must remain in your yesterday. Faith matures when you stop demanding signs and start recognizing patterns of faithfulness. Look back and trace the invisible hand of God through your life. There were moments you did not know how you would survive, yet you did. There were times doors closed that you later thanked God for. There were delays that redirected you away from harm. That was not coincidence. That was divine mapping in action. The same God who carried you through what you thought would end you is the God who has already gone ahead to prepare what will sustain you next. Do not underestimate the power of agreement with God. When you align your words with divine truth, your spirit begins to stand taller. Speak life even when circumstances resist it. Speak trust even when emotions argue against it. Your words do not change God's plan, but they change your posture toward it. Complaining does not alter the map. It only exhausts the traveler. Gratitude strengthens your steps. Trust sharpens your vision. Obedience accelerates alignment. There is a sacred responsibility that comes with knowing tomorrow is mapped. It calls you to live intentionally today. You cannot treat today carelessly when you know it is a bridge to divine purpose. Every decision, every response, every act of integrity matters. You are not just passing time, you are positioning yourself. God honors faithfulness in small things because small things prepare you for larger trust. What you do in private matters. How you respond under pressure matters. God sees what others overlook, and God rewards what others dismiss. Let this truth settle into your bones. No detour can derail what God has ordained Even when you wonder, God recalculates. Even when you hesitate, God remains patient. Even when you make mistakes, God redeems. Redemption is built into the map. Grace is not an afterthought. It is a provision. God knew where you would stumble and still chose you. God knew where you would doubt and still committed to you. The map was never fragile enough to be ruined by your humanity. There is coming a moment when what you have believed quietly will manifest publicly. What you carried in prayer will appear in reality. What you trusted without evidence will become undeniable. That moment does not arrive by striving, it arrives by alignment. Stay aligned with God, stay surrendered, stay faithful. The unseen work happening now is far greater than what you can currently perceive. Roots grow in darkness before trees rise into visibility. God is building depth before granting display. Refuse to let fear narrate your future. Fear has no authority where God has already spoken. Fear predicts disaster, but God declares destiny. Fear focuses on loss, but God speaks of fulfillment. Fear asks, what if? But God says, I already know. When fear rises, answer it with trust. When doubt whispers, respond with remembrance of what God has already done. You do not need to silence fear. You need to outrank it with faith. Your tomorrow is not dependent on global conditions, human systems, or shifting opinions. God is not threatened by instability. God is not shaken by uncertainty. God rules above trends, beyond economies, outside limitations. When God maps tomorrow, God does so with full awareness of every variable. Nothing catches God off guard. Nothing interrupts divine authority. You may not understand how provision will come, but you can trust that provision has already been assigned. Even now, God is inviting you to rest, not because the journey is over, but because trust fuels endurance. Rest is an act of faith. Rest declares that you believe God is working even when you are not striving. Rest is not passivity, it is confidence. When you rest, you are saying, God, I trust your map more than my anxiety. And that trust becomes strength. Carry this conviction with you into every moment. Your life is not drifting. It is directed. You are not wandering. You are walking. You are not forgotten. You are foreseen. Tomorrow is not waiting to decide your fate. Tomorrow has already been addressed by God. And as you continue forward, step by step, breath by breath, you will begin to notice that what once frightened you now strengthens you. What once confused you now guides you. What once felt impossible now feels inevitable, because the authority of God surrounds your journey and the map continues to unfold, not in haste, but in precision. And as you walk, you will sense a growing assurance that every season has meaning, every delay has purpose, every challenge has direction, and the confidence rising within you is not arrogance, but alignment as you continue moving forward, trusting God, not needing every answer, not fearing every turn, because the path ahead is already marked. And even now, God is guiding you deeper into purpose, deeper into trust, deeper into what has been prepared, and the unfolding continues as your faith expands and your spirit settles, and the certainty remains that tomorrow is mapped and you are walking into it with God leading every step, and the journey carries on into what has already been written and established by God, whose authority does not end and whose purpose continues unfolding beyond what the eye can see and the heart can fully grasp as you keep walking forward into the divine design that is still opening before you, without pause, without retreat, without fear. Trusting completely in God, who remains sovereign and faithful as the path continues onward into what has already been prepared and is still unfolding even now. There is a moment when faith stops being an idea and becomes a posture. It is the moment you realize that God is not merely responding to your prayers, but inviting you into agreement with divine intention. Agreement changes how you walk, how you speak, how you endure. When you agree with God, you stop fighting the process and start flowing with purpose. You no longer resist the shaping, you surrender to it. And surrender is not weakness. It is alignment with the highest authority that exists. God does not ask for your control. God asks for your trust, because trust releases peace where control only produces strain. you must recognize that tomorrow being mapped does not mean tomorrow will be predictable. God's ways are higher than patterns and expectations. God often chooses paths that confuse the intellect but strengthen the spirit. What seems illogical to you is often strategic to God. When God leads you through unfamiliar terrain, it is not to disorient you, but to detach you from false securities. God does not want your confidence anchored in routine, familiarity, or human assurance. God wants your confidence anchored in divine faithfulness. When the familiar disappears, faith becomes essential, and essential faith becomes unbreakable. There is a sacred discipline in trusting what you cannot yet see. Vision is not limited to sight. Vision is the ability to stand in the present while honoring the future God has already ordained. People who lack vision panic when circumstances shift. But those who trust God remain steady because they understand that movement does not mean disorder. Change does not mean loss. Transition does not mean danger. When God maps tomorrow, movement is a sign of progress, not instability. Some of you have been afraid to let go of what you know because the unknown feels threatening. But the unknown is only threatening when you believe God is absent from it. God is already present in what you have not yet encountered. God is not waiting to meet you at the destination. God has been waiting for you to trust enough to move forward. Every step into obedience is a step into territory God has already claimed. The unknown becomes sacred ground. When God stands there, understand this. God's map is not built around your fear, but around your purpose. Fear exaggerates obstacles. Purpose transcends them. Fear asks how. Purpose asks who. When you know who leads you, you do not need to know every detail. God never demanded that you understand everything, only that you follow faithfully. Faith does not require clarity, it requires courage. Courage is born when you realize that even if you stumble, God will not let you fall beyond recovery. There is also this truth that must be spoken with art. Hority, delay is not defeat. Many of the most powerful moments in life are preceded by long seasons of obscurity. God hides what God is preparing so it can mature without interference. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. You cannot rush growth without damaging the outcome. God values depth over speed, foundation over appearance. What is built slowly by God will stand firmly when pressure comes. You are not forgotten in the waiting. Waiting is not wasted time, it is invested time. In the waiting, God strengthens your character, sharpens your discernment, humbles your spirit, and anchors your faith. Waiting teaches you to listen rather than rush, to trust rather than demand, to depend rather than strive. When the appointed moment arrives, you will be grateful for the waiting because you will recognize that you are ready not just to receive, but to sustain what God brings. There is a divine invitation in this message. Stop living as though you must defend yourself from the future. God is your defender. God stands between you and what would destroy you. Not every battle requires your involvement. Some battles require your stillness. Stillness is not inactivity. It is confidence in divine authority. When you remain still in trust, God moves with power. When you stop striving, divine strategy unfolds. Let your faith mature beyond emotional dependence. Feelings fluctuate, but God remains constant. There will be days when faith feels strong and days when it feels quiet. Faith is not measured by volume, but by consistency. Even silent trust is powerful when it is rooted in truth. God honors faith that continues even when emotion fades. Commitment outlasts excitement. Trust outlasts fear. And what endures is what God builds upon. Remember this always. God does not waste pain. Pain becomes instruction when surrendered. Pain becomes wisdom when reflected upon. Pain becomes testimony when redeemed. God weaves even the most difficult experiences into a greater narrative of purpose. What wounded you will one day empower you. What tried to break you will refine you. What challenged your faith will deepen it. Nothing surrendered to God remains meaningless. Do not measure your progress by comparison. God's map for your life is unique. Comparing your journey to another's will only distract you from your own calling. God does not duplicate destinies. God custom designs purpose. Your pace is intentional. Your path is deliberate. What matters is not how quickly you arrive, but whether you remain aligned with God along the way. There is a sacred boldness rising in those who truly believe tomorrow is mapped. They stop negotiating with fear. They stop postponing obedience. They stop waiting for perfect conditions. They act with quiet confidence, knowing that divine authority backs their steps. They do not need applause, they need alignment. They do not seek permission, they seek faithfulness. And faithfulness always attracts divine favor. Eve. Now, God is inviting you to release what you have been gripping too tightly. Control has limited your peace. Anxiety has clouded your vision. God is calling you higher, not into recklessness, but into trust. Trust frees the mind. Trust strengthens the spirit. Trust opens the heart to receive what fear blocks. When you trust God fully, you make room for divine movement that no human effort can replicate. The future does not belong to the fearful, it belongs to the faithful. Those who walk with God walk with assurance. Not because life is easy, but because God is present. Presence transforms hardship into endurance. Presence transforms uncertainty into expectation. Presence transforms waiting into hope. God's presence is the greatest promise embedded in the map of tomorrow. As you continue forward, let your inner dialogue align with divine truth. Speak hope when doubt arises. Speak trust when fear intrudes. Speak gratitude even before you see fulfillment. Gratitude is faith expressed in advance. It acknowledges that what God has promised is as good as done. Gratitude shifts your focus from lack to provision, from anxiety to assurance. You are not standing on fragile ground. You are standing on divine intention. The same God who shaped time itself has shaped your journey. Nothing has been overlooked. Nothing has been miscalculated. Nothing has escaped divine awareness. Tomorrow is not approaching with uncertainty. Tomorrow is approaching with purpose. And as you move forward, there will be moments when clarity arrives suddenly. Moments when peace floods unexpectedly. Moments when you realize that what once felt impossible has quietly become reality. And you will understand that the path was unfolding all along, guided by the steady hand of God. And even now, that unfolding continues, drawing you deeper into trust, deeper into purpose, deeper into alignment as you keep walking forward. Not because you see everything clearly, but because you know who leads you. And the assurance within you grows stronger with every step as tomorrow continues to open before you are already mapped, already guarded, already prepared by God, whose faithfulness does not waver and whose guidance does not fail as the journey carries on without fear, without retreat, without hesitation, trusting fully in the divine design that continues unfolding beyond this moment and into what is still ahead as you walk onward with confidence, grounded in God, and the path remains steady and purposeful and still unfolding even now. There is another dimension to this truth that must be awakened within you. When God maps tomorrow, God also entrusts you with stewardship of today. Stewardship is not ownership. It is responsibility with reverence. You are entrusted with thoughts, choices, time, influence, and integrity because these are the tools through which the map unfolds. What you nurture today will determine how you experience tomorrow. God does not force purpose. God invites participation. Every time you choose faith over fear, obedience over convenience, truth over comfort, you are aligning yourself with the flow of what God has already ordained. You must also understand that opposition does not mean you are off course. Often, resistance is confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. What threatens the enemy's agenda always attracts resistance. But resistance is never stronger than divine authority. God does not shield you from opposition. God strengthens you through it. Opposition sharpens discernment, clarifies conviction, and fortifies resolve. When you encounter resistance, do not retreat, stand firm, because the map includes victory beyond the struggle. There are seasons when God strips away excess, not to leave you lacking, but to make you lighter. Excess expectations, excess dependencies, excess noise can slow your progress. God removes what distracts so you can focus on what matters. This pruning may feel uncomfortable, but it is purposeful. God cuts back not to harm the branch, but to increase its capacity to bear fruit. What is removed makes room for what is coming. Another truth you must hold firmly is this: humility keeps you aligned with the map. Pride insists on control. Humility trusts direction. Pride demands answers. Humility accepts guidance. God resists the proud but draws near to the humble. Humility keeps your heart teachable, your spirit flexible, and your faith resilient. When you remain humble, correction does not offend you, waiting does not embitter you, and success does not intoxicate you. Humility anchors you when elevation comes. There will be moments when God's map takes you through places you never planned to visit. Unexpected assignments, unchosen responsibilities, unfamiliar roles. Do not despise these moments. Often, God uses unplanned seasons to unlock dormant potential. Skills you did not know you had emerge under pressure. Strength you never exercised rises when required. God reveals who you are becoming by placing you where growth is unavoidable. Your testimony is also part of the map, not as performance, but as proof. Proof that God restores, proof that God sustains, proof that God fulfills. Your life becomes evidence that trust in God is not misplaced. Even your scars become signposts for others. God does not hide redeemed stories. God uses them to guide others toward hope. What you survive with faith becomes a message without words. Guard your inner life fiercely. The battlefield is often internal before it becomes external. Doubt begins in thought before it manifests in action. Align your thoughts with truth. Do not allow lies to settle unchallenged in your mind. When thoughts contradict what God has declared, reject them immediately. Your mind is not a playground for fear. It is a dwelling place for truth. What you believe shapes how you live, and how you live reveals what you truly believe. Generosity is another expression of trust in the mapped future. When you give freely, you declare that you believe provision is ongoing, not scarce. You do not hoard when you trust the source. Generosity loosens the grip of fear and opens channels of blessing. God does not ask you to give to impoverish you. God invites you to give to free you from the illusion of control. What you release in faith returns in purpose. Justice also matters on this journey. Walking with God requires integrity in action, fairness in dealing, compassion in response. You cannot separate faith from how you treat others. God's map includes righteousness, not just reward. How you walk matters as much as where you are going. When you choose justice, you align with the character of God, and alignment always brings favor. As the path unfolds, you will notice that endurance becomes easier, not because challenges disappear, but because trust deepens. You begin to recognize the rhythm of divine movement. You sense when to act and when to wait. You learn that silence can be instruction and stillness can be strategy. Discernment sharpens with experience, and experience grows through obedience. Legacy is also written into the map. Your faithfulness affects more than your own life. It influences those who come after you. The way you trust God under pressure teaches others how to trust under their own burdens. Your consistency becomes a blueprint for those watching quietly. God thinks generationally. What you do in obedience today echoes beyond your lifetime. There is no wasted obedience. Even when results are not immediate, obedience stores value in eternity. God keeps record beyond what is visible. Faithfulness that seems unnoticed on earth is celebrated in the unseen realm. The reward of obedience is not always immediate success. Sometimes it is deeper trust, greater peace, stronger character. These rewards sustain you long after circumstances change. As you continue walking, let courage become habitual. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it. Courage honors God because it declares that trust outweighs uncertainty. Every courageous step reinforces your confidence in divine guidance. Courage compounds. Each step makes the next one easier. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not overlooked. You are exactly where the map says you need to be to become who God has called you to be. Time has not defeated you. It has prepared you. The future is not rushing away from you. It is unfolding toward you under divine command. And as this truth settles deeper, something shifts within you. Anxiety loosens its grip. Hope rises quietly but firmly. Faith steadies your breath. You begin to walk with assurance that does not depend on applause or explanation. You move forward because you know the one who leads you does not misguide, does not miscalculate, does not misplace those who trust completely. And as you keep moving, the path continues to open. And the confidence continues to grow, and the trust continues to deepen, and the unfolding remains steady and intentional as God continues guiding, shaping, strengthening, revealing step by step, moment by moment, into what has already been prepared. And the journey carries on under divine authority into what is still ahead and still unfolding even now. Now hear this with clarity and weight, because this is the moment that demands a response from your soul. Knowing that tomorrow is mapped is not meant to comfort you into passivity. It is meant to awaken you into purpose. This truth calls you to rise from complacency, to shake off excuses, to confront the places where fear has ruled longer than faith. God has not revealed this to impress you, but to invite you. An invitation to walk deliberately, to live intentionally, to trust deeply. An invitation to stop drifting and start deciding. Decide that your life will align with what God has already declared over it. Examine your life honestly in the presence of God. Look at where you have settled when you were called to grow. Look at where you have delayed obedience, waiting for perfect conditions. Look at where you have allowed fear to speak louder than faith. This is not condemnation, this is awakening. God does not expose to shame, but to heal. God does not challenge you to discourage you, but to elevate you. What you acknowledge, God can transform. What you surrender, God can redirect. What you trust, God can fulfill. Renew your purpose today by renewing your trust. Purpose is not found by chasing outcomes. It is found by aligning with God. Let go of the weight you were never meant to carry. Release the need to control what God has already secured. Lay down the narratives that no longer serve truth. Rise with a heart that says, God, I trust you more than my fear, more than my understanding, more than my past. That declaration shifts atmospheres. That decision changes direction. That trust unlocks movement. Walk closer to God, not with ritual, but with relationship. Let your days be marked by awareness of divine presence. Let your choices reflect reverence. Let your words carry faith. Let your actions demonstrate trust. Closeness to God is not measured by perfection, but by surrender. Every step toward God is met with grace. Every moment of trust deepens connection. Every act of obedience strengthens alignment. Carry this conviction into every tomorrow you face. You are not walking alone. You are not walking blindly. You are not walking without direction. Walk boldly. Walk humbly, walk faithfully. Let your life become a living testimony of trust in God. Let your courage speak when words fall short. Let your faith stand when circumstances shake. Let your peace become evidence that you know who holds the map. As you leave this moment, let it mark you. Let it shape how you rise tomorrow. Let it guide how you respond under pressure. Let it remind you when doubt whispers that God has already gone before you. Step forward with resolve. Live with intention. Trust without reservation. Walk with God knowing that the path ahead is not uncertain, not abandoned, not fragile, but firmly established by the authority, wisdom, and faithfulness of God, who calls you to walk fully alive, fully surrendered, and fully confident in the truth that tomorrow is mapped and your life is held securely in the hands of God.